included a specified budget, and there was some pre-testing with consultants to ask whether that pre-specified budget was going to be sufficient to do the task as they understood it. And so the budget was set, and it hasn't been changed, and it's fixed, and we've in effect asked the consultants to give us the best possible value that we can within that defined budget, and the consultants are going about their task to do that. So there is no budget increase involved.
So that RFP is within that constraint?
Yeah, the RFP contains the same budget constraint that we've been working with all the time.
Okay, good. Along. And just lastly, before others, Madam Chair, I think there's a sort of a feeling that this is about the city centre port only, but it's not. It's the inland ports, the infrastructure that connects, be it road, rail. It's about connections with other ports, and I won't go to that, won't expand on that too much, but we can't forget the port of Onehunga, which is part of the study as well. It's not a city downtown-centric port study. Is that your understanding?
My understanding is that the scope itself is the downtown port. However, when you think about what you might do with a downtown port, there are all sorts of consequences that would occur beyond the port gate. A relocation, for example, might affect another port. If you leave the port where it is and it expands, as another example, you need to build transport connections. So we're not looking from the outside in and saying, okay, let's understand national port strategy, regional port strategy, national transport strategy, and work our way in and work out what the answer is. We're working from the inside out. We're saying, let's understand what the potentially viable options are, and then understand what those implications are. And one of those implications might be an implication for the Onehunga port, as an example.
Okay, I'm clear. Thank you.
Good questions, good answers. Councillor Quacks.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Rick, for doing this work. It's highly important, as you're aware. Given the scope and the amount of work that needs to be completed, are you satisfied that you can get it all done in the time that's been set?
I'd like to, let me try and answer that. I see no reason at this point why it can't be done in that time. We're running on track in terms of getting the scope agreed and getting the consultants appointed. The consultants have a period of time that they have indicated they can do it within, and we are left with a period of approximately 6 weeks or so to digest their conclusions and to come up with our conclusions. If we operate really well as a consensus working group and the consultants operate really well, then maybe we'll be in a situation where they'll provide us with a report and we'll all have a look at it and say that's really good and pass it through. We do have enough time, I think, to resolve the issues, and we're doing good preparation to be able to resolve the issues should there be issues when we get the report. But I can't promise what's going to happen in terms of the consensus process in that last period. I haven't been through that particular process before and don't understand where we'll be.
And I guess the reason why I asked that question, Madam Chair, is that this is going to be hugely important in terms of the unitary plan, and we've got a whole bunch of stuff coming to us next year, and this would be just one of them, and this will be very important in that respect. So, look, and perhaps a question that sort of directly or indirectly relates to that, looking through the report here, the scope, and I look at some of these things and I wonder, in the greater context of what we're trying to achieve here, and as far as the ports are concerned and the problems we're trying to overcome and the questions that we're trying to resolve, is it really important that the physical and psychological and spiritual health of Aucklanders be included? And what do we mean by spiritual health? Well, I certainly have some trouble understanding that.
I think my own view of this is that there's a very long list of criteria here. And we need to work ourselves to a very short list of options. And then we need to understand what would make us choose one option over another. And my expectation is that in that process, there will be many things that are on that list that will end up not being critical to the decision. Should that become critical, I would expect that it will be surfaced. But if you look at the long list and the challenge that we've given to the consultants, they won't all get full treatment. And do I think that one's important? It may or may not be, depending on how the options form up.
Okay, thank you.
Member Taipere.
Tēnā koe, Madam Chair, ngā mihi nui ki a koutou tēnei wā. Just be fair to say that the Port's future study, the scope, includes the management and stewardship of natural and physical resources. So, knowing that, when would the engagement with the Independent Māori Statutory Board be? And how?
I'm going to try and answer that one. I think through the process and up until the recommendations come to the council, that view will come from mana whenua. Once the recommendations, and that then becomes, once the recommendations come to the council, that becomes the end of the process for these groups. But then a governance process kicks in, and that is with the council, with the IMSB, and it might again also be with mana whenua at a governance level rather than through the study. So that's where I see the IMSB particularly kicking in, is at the governance phase.
So, through you, Madam Chair, the issue I have with that is we have two members on council committees, but the Independent Māori Statutory Board is an independent body, which specific legislation provides for appropriate engagement and input into council documents and policies and plans. And now we've got an amended recommendation under B to endorse something that has had no input from the Independent Māori Statutory Board. Clearly, I will, and we will have to object to B now it's got endorsement because the process has failed to include the Independent Māori Statutory Board. So I just need to make clear, Jux, that I think you need to review the engagement plan that you just spelled out and ensure that the board is included appropriately as per the legislation provides for.
I will ask for clarification, but Member Taipere, I think there just needs to be clarity here. In the same way that the councillors are moving to endorse the future port study, they've had a chance to read this and they'll make that decision. It's no different from the IMSB members who are present at this table. You can't be both. You can't be sitting in a governance decision-making ability and part of the process. The councillors are not part of that process. Elected members are not part of the process. And the IMSB can't be governing and part of the process. We are simply accepting what we asked this group to do, which is to go forward. We're trusting the community and the mana whenua groups to come up with the scope for this study. We can't be judge and jury on this, and we can't have two bites at the cherry. We're really clear about that. So that's probably a discussion for the IMSB to have.
Well, no, Madam Chair, I don't agree with you at all. You can't substitute the Independent Māori Statutory Board and its legislation via a council committee, which is what you just said.
We might just have to agree to disagree on
well,
that one.
I don't know if that's the appropriate course of action, is it, Madam Chair? Just because you disagree, again, this is the lawful approach that I'm seeking as provided by Parliament.
Well, we may well ask for advice on that, but our understanding is that as equal members of this decision-making body, we support the scope and the process that we have all endorsed. It doesn't give us the opportunity to sit around that table and be consulted as part of the group. We've been very clear about that, and that was debated long and hard, Member Taipere.
Well, Madam Chair, may I ask this question? Do you accept that the Independent Māori Statutory Board under legislation is independent from Auckland Council?
Then, if it's fully independent, I question why you would join us at this table making these kind of decisions.
Because, Madam Chair, Parliament provided the opportunity to sit on the council committees in regards to the management and stewardship of natural and physical resources. That's why we sit here. And the fact of the matter is the Independent Māori Statutory Board is an independent body to mana whenua and to Auckland Council. It has a specific function and role, and it needs to be acknowledged and recognised, and in this process it has been.
I don't know if any of our senior staff wish to give advice on
Take
this,
legal advice.
or if our legal advisor wishes to give legal advice.
She looks excited the most.
Maybe.
Oh, she will.
Just let her move.
Certainly correct that the board is independent of council. It's certainly correct that it has an advisory and participatory role in the governance of Auckland and is a critical and fundamental part of our constitutional arrangements. But I do consider the outline in terms of the level of participation that's been Jark's indicated and which the Deputy Mayor's outlined does accommodate correctly the statutory framework within which the Independent Māori Statutory Board sits. That's not to say that there's a prohibition on engaging at different levels, and to the extent to which Jacques' team might go away and think about the extent to which the engagement process might accommodate the concerns that have been articulated here. I think that would be a helpful activity, and to come back to the committee on that point.
That would be useful, so I think we need to leave that there.
Madam Chair, may I ask a
Yes.
question? So, just picking up from that advice, are you saying that council can bring documents through and put them on the council table for endorsement that relate to the management and stewardship of natural and physical resources without the board's input?
Well, the board has input exactly at this committee forum.
So you're saying that our input via an independent body is substituted by a council committee, where we have 9 members and we only have 2 at this table?
It's not my understanding that every council document comes via the board for the board's endorsement before it comes to council committee here.
Well, there is a clause, through you, Madam Chair, that says that the design and execution of those documents. So it's in the legislation.
It's to work with the Auckland Council on the design and execution of documents and processes to implement the Council's statutory responsibilities towards mana whenua groups and matawaka of Tamaki Makaurau.
So do you, through you, Madam Chair, do you accept that this scoping study fits in that criteria?
I'm not sure that without looking at it in more detail I could agree with that, Member Taiperi. What I do think is that there's a clear indication under the legislation to work together, and that's what I'm suggesting in terms of that Jark's group could take away and look at in more detail.
Okay. So again, Madam Chair, thank you very much. Clear that, you know, that we do want the future process, but we are clearly at odds on the existing and past process to date. And I state clearly that it's my strong view as the Chairman of the Independent Māori Statutory Board that we've been excluded from that process as legislative provided for.
I'm very happy to have a discussion with you, Member Taiperi, about how your concerns might be able to be accommodated.
Councillor Walker.
Sure, I'm very encouraged by this port study and the leadership of Dr. Rick Boven and the team. I've got a couple of questions, and it may be that they're within the scope, but the questions go to scope. One is around biosecurity. I see ballast water discharge, but obviously the port is one of the prime entries into New Zealand of organisms. Maybe I haven't picked that up. On biosecurity, there's a point there on the effect on ecosystem conditions under marine ecology.
That's right.
But it's, okay, if I can just expand, you got spiders, snakes, I mean, the number of things that come under biosecurity as it goes to ports is pretty extensive. And it's a vital consideration. So I just...
Yeah. Let me ensure that we note that and ensure that's fed into the process for consideration by the consultants.
Okay, and the other issue, and it may be implicit in what you've got here, and that goes to technological considerations. I'll give you two examples, and these are underway. One is robotics, as they impact on port activities, and an increasing number of ports are employing robotics, so that's an incredibly important consideration, and there's sensor technology that goes to that and a number of other technologies. The other thing that's incredibly important in technological changes that goes to vehicles is autonomous vehicles, self-drive vehicles, so you could have a circumstance where vehicles arrive, they don't need people to shift them, they just shift themselves, and that is imminent and is an incredibly important technological consideration that will impact on the port. So there are a couple of examples. So I see economic, environmental and social, but technological is really a biggie.
Yeah, and in the communications with consultants, we've been very clear that we need to take account of future conditions. And one of them is drivers, is volume drivers, and technology. I think you've listed a couple of what I would think of, at least just in my understanding, is, without having thought about it very hard, is about half a dozen of those things. Some of them we can see they're going to happen, and we can't see what impact they're going to have yet, perhaps. Others we have to think about what might happen 30, 40, 50 years out.